Revealed: the inspiring truth about a millionaire's blind mother and the shocking act of betrayal. David sat in his polished office, the faint scent of fresh coffee mingling with the faint hum of the heating system as he prepared his case. Outside, the maple trees flanked the streets like silent guardians, but inside, he felt trapped in a tempest. Just a few weeks stood between him and the partnership he'd spent years clawing toward. Yet, despite the glory that beckoned, a dark shadow loomed over his ambitions. His heart twisted as he thought of Margaret, his mother, who had sacrificed everything to raise him alone after the loss of his father. The woman was the embodiment of grace and unwavering strength, and her blindness had never dimmed the brightness with which she faced life. But now, her trust in others might lead to her undoing. In the back of his mind simmered the painful reality that his mentor, Daniel Hargrove, the very man who guided him through the labyrinth of corporate law, had ensnared him in a web of betrayal. A treachery that sought to strip away the one thing that could change their lives forever, a family inheritance. It wasn't just money. It was history, legacy, and a potential for transformation, yet Hargrove was willing to exploit that history for his own gain. A wave of unease churned in David's stomach, each thought nagging like a relentless itch, forcing him to question everything he'd ever learned. Was success worth sacrificing the honor that meant everything to him? How could he expose the man he'd seen as a father figure? The betrayal wasn't simply an act of greed, it was personal. Margaret was entrapped in a friendship with the opposition, seemingly unaware that charm and exploitation often wore the same face. He paced the floor, looking out the window at the street where laughter echoed, oblivious to the internal battle raging within him. The weight of ambition pressed against his chest, threatening to suffocate as memories flickered. Margaret teaching him to read, the nights they'd spent wrapping gifts together, the sacrifices he knew she made to ensure his dreams stayed alive. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. He felt the familiar grip of dread tighten as he realized the stakes were higher than his career. They involved everything he held dear. Would he be able to confront Hargrove in court, risking everything, or succumb to the path paved with ambition, forsaking the values his mother instilled? The thought of his mother's trusting smile burned through him, illuminating the dark corners of hesitation. What would she think if she knew he hesitated to fight for her? His determination surged. He needed answers and a strategy, but the right path tangled deeper, blurring the lines between integrity and success. The clock ticked steadily, an ominous reminder that time was running out. With each passing moment, the pressure mounted like an impending storm, the courtroom looming ahead like a predatory beast. At that crucial moment, David realized the real question hung suspended. What was he truly willing to sacrifice to protect Margaret? The weight of the impending confrontation gnawed at his resolve, pulling him deeper into a vortex of anguish and determination. He steeled himself to face not just Hargrove, but the uncomfortable truths about loyalty, blindness, and what it meant to truly claim one's legacy. This was just the beginning, and as he opened his mouth to speak, the tension simmered, waiting for his next move. David stood at the precipice of a decision. The polished wood of his desk felt colder under his fingertips, grounding him as the stakes swirled in an ethereal dance around his thoughts. In those fleeting moments, he turned inward, grappling with the depth of the betrayal he faced, and the potential fallout that hung in the air like storm clouds ready to burst. He had spent years crafting his identity, his success founded not just on intellect, but on the morals that his mother had instilled in him. Margaret had taught him the value of character, and he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that walking the corporate path with Hargrove meant losing a part of himself. As he prepared to confront his mentor, he rehearsed the lines in his mind. This wasn't merely a business transaction. It was a conflict steeped in emotion, legacy, and the very essence of who he was. The office felt stifling, closing in around him as he paced. What would it say about him if he let Hargrove bleed his family's achievements dry? Would he merely become another cog in the machine, a soulless representative of the very greed he despised? He needed to gather evidence, construct a plan that allowed him to wrestle back control without sacrificing everything he held dear. Anxiety pulsed in his veins. Focus, he told himself, focusing on the steps that could clear the fog of uncertainty clouding his mind. Gritting his teeth, he made a decision. He would meet with Margaret that evening, search for clarity together and discuss Hargrove. Her wisdom had always guided him through the darkest corners of his life. The thought of her comforting presence filled him with a flicker of hope. Perhaps together they could discern the truth amidst the chaos. As the sun slipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows across his office, he packed his briefcase with determination. Each item he placed inside, the case files, pens, a small notebook, became a tangible reminder of the battle to come. The journey to the family home held promises of revisiting memories and rekindling the strength that had shaped his resolve. Driving through familiar streets, he reflected on the weight of their shared history. Each turn evoked visions of laughter and warmth, memories woven into the fabric of his being. Yet, those recollections also birthed an unsettling reality. Hargrove had taken their bond for granted, manipulated it for his gain. Would his mother feel betrayed if she knew the depths to which their trust had been corrupted? Arriving home, David paused at the door, inhaling the scent of nostalgia that wafted from within. Margaret sat in her favorite chair, the soft light illuminating her features, her hands finely tracing the surface of a worn book. So many conversations had originated from that very spot, but tonight he sensed the gravity of what must be discussed. "David," her voice broke the silence, rich with loving concern. "You seem troubled." He took a deep breath, sitting across from her, his heart pounding in his chest. This conversation would redefine everything. "Mum, we need to talk about Hargrove." Her brow furrowed, sensing the urgency in his tone. In that moment, he realized he would have to reveal not just the professional betrayal, but also the deeper implications of loyalty and trust. A storm brewed within him, ready to spill at any moment. As the words began to spill out, David recognized that this battle was not solely about inheritance or ambition. It was about safeguarding the very essence of what they had built together. Yet he didn't fully grasp the potential fallout of their conversation, nor the shocking decisions that lay ahead. The enormity of his choice loomed larger than life, and as he spoke, he felt the ground shift beneath his feet. What would Margaret reveal in response? Would her faith in their bond withstand the weight of betrayal, or would it expose rifts far deeper than he could ever anticipate? As their eyes locked, the tension thickened. The pivotal moment approached, and he knew he could no longer avoid the truth that awaited them. David's voice trembled as he disclosed the details surrounding Hargrove's intentions, a calculated scheme lurking beneath layers of corporate loyalty that felt all too personal. Each word carved a deeper crease in Margaret's brow, her expression oscillating between shock and concern. The weight of unspoken words clung to the air as mother and son navigated through treacherous waters of deception. "Why would he do this?" she finally asked, her gaze piercing yet softened by years of nurturing compassion. "You trusted him, didn't you?" "It's not just trust, Mom. It's about our family legacy." His fists clenched, knuckles white against the fabric of his slacks. The suffocating dread of betrayal hung heavy in his chest. Hargrove had not merely misled him, he had threatened to dismantle the values instilled in him since childhood. Margaret leaned forward, her hands catching David's gaze. "You have to remember that character isn't just what we say, it's what we do when the stakes are high. What are you willing to fight for, David? Your ambition or the values we've fought to uphold?" A shift occurred within David, igniting embers of resolve. He had feared that choosing to resist would mean losing career opportunities or favor, but what was the worth of success if built upon treachery? His mother's words were like a lighthouse, guiding him back from the depths of confusion. He could either be the architect of his fate or remain a pawn in Hargrove's game. "You're right," he replied, his voice steadier. "This isn't just a business deal, it's my integrity on the line. I can't just let this go." Margaret's eyes softened, a flicker of pride illuminating her features. Then we need to devise a strategy, one that ensures you don't lose sight of who you are while confronting the threat. The next few hours dissolved into strategic thinking. Tobacco-stained notes and diagrams cluttering the dining table, they mapped out a plan, dissecting Hargrove's tactics while examining David's strengths. He realized that the analytical precision he honed in the corporate world could pivot into a weapons-grade tool, keenly focused on pinpointing vulnerabilities. Margaret probed deeper into David's emotional landscape, cataloging not only his fears and aspirations, but also unveiling psychosocial strategies from the past, lessons learned from social interactions outside the confines of boardrooms. It became evident at that moment that his reluctance to act stemmed from a fear of conflict rather than inability. The potential for confrontation was daunting, yet the alternative, complacently conceding to Hargrove, was far harsher. "So you have hidden talents, David," Margaret affirmed, her confidence in him a reassuring balm. "Use that innate ability to connect with others, not just in business, but to rally support. Make our story known." His heart raced at the prospect of launching a counterstrike, not merely for himself but for the legacy he began to feel was worth more than gold. The following morning, equipped with both the plan and determination, David approached the office armed not with the animosity of revenge, but with a resolve that reflected his ideals. The energy was different. He felt the pulse of his own purpose guiding him. As he walked into the building, he did not just present himself as an employee, but as a steward of a legacy he now recognized was worth defending. Yet with every step towards confrontation, a new apprehension loomed. Knowledge that revealing the truth might not just sever ties with Hargrove, but develop unforeseen rifts elsewhere. Trust, once shattered, could ricochet in ways he hadn't anticipated. Arriving at Hargrove's office, David steeled himself against the tidal wave of impending confrontation. The polished furniture felt imposing around him, a fitting arena for a battle of wills. The door was ajar, Hargrove's figure obscured by the haze of morning sunlight, a shadowy silhouette in the glow of industry. "What are you going to say?" a voice whispered in the back of his mind, loud with uncertainty. Just then, as he approached the threshold, the hum of the office quieted. In that heartbeat, David realized his life would pivot. The moment of truth loomed ahead, and he would need to confront not just Hargrove, but the very fabric of his beliefs. Would he emerge stronger, holding true to his character, or be consumed by the world he dared to challenge? Determination coursed through him. He was ready to discover exactly who he had become. And as he pushed open the door, the question lingered. Would he fight for the legacy, or would he find himself ensnared in another betrayal? David's heart raced as he stepped into Hargrove's office, a carefully curated chaos surrounding him. The room was filled with an air of certainty, yet he felt more uncertain than ever. Hargrove, perched behind a sleek desk, appeared a master of his domain, radiating a confidence that only added to David's inner turmoil. The lushness of the office, teeming with accolades and success, felt stifling, as if it were mocking him. "David," Hargrove said, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" A bead of sweat formed at David's temple. Declarations of loyalty danced on the edge of his tongue, yet facing the man who had betrayed him tested every ounce of his resolve. He paused, collecting himself before responding, determined not to let Hargrove's veneer of charm disarm him. "I know about your plans." The words came out as a whisper at first, tentative but tinged with newfound ferocity. Hargrove's brow raised in mock surprise. "Plans? My dear boy, you must be mistaken. This is corporate strategy, nothing personal." "Isn't it?" David countered, stepping closer. "You've maneuvered behind my back, undermining years of hard work and values I stand for. You've made this personal." The bitterness in his voice surprised him. It had been a long time since he felt this raw connection to his own words. The air shifted as a challenge hung between them, the silence stretching thin. Hargrove's expression hardened, the charming facade cracking to reveal something more sinister. "You're playing a dangerous game. Careers are at stake, David, not just yours." "Exactly." David straightened his posture, newfound courage surging through him. "And if I'm going down, it won't be without a fight. I won't let you manipulate my family's legacy. For the first time, he saw a flicker of uncertainty in Hargrove's eyes. It was fleeting but evident. Yes, David had stumbled upon a small victory against the looming menace. He needed to embrace this moment, for if he backed down now, all he had spoken about would be for naught. Think carefully about your next steps, Hargrove warned, an edge creeping into his tone. There are repercussions for stirring up trouble. That warning echoed in David's mind like a bell tolling. He realized Hargrove's threats were not mere bravado. They were rooted in a powerful reality where alliances and betrayals intertwined like twisted vines. As he gazed at Hargrove, a strategic and ruthless player, a churn of emotions swelled within him. Part of him feared the consequences, but another part, a deeper, more resolute essence, understood that personal integrity superseded career ambitions. Does threatening someone else's integrity make you a better businessman? David prodded, unable to contain the rising dissatisfaction that mixed with his resolve. Your approach undermines everything true leaders should uphold. You teach others to follow your path of betrayal. What kind of leader does that make you? Hargrove leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You're naive, David. The business world is cutthroat. You either adapt or fall behind. Perhaps, David replied, feeling the fervor building within him. But I won't lose myself in the process. I'll gather those who believe in honesty and integrity. Enough compromises have been made. He felt a shift within himself then. Clarity replaced uncertainty. The decision to forge alliances would be rooted in authenticity, and he could be the catalyst for a different kind of leadership, one where trust and values mattered. As he walked out of the office, each step ignited a flicker of hope. Yet lingering questions rang out. Could he truly rally support against Hargrove's machinations? In the quiet of the hallway, David let the reality sink in. This was his path. The struggle had just begun. Now came the vital task of amassing allies, of redeeming the promise he made to himself and to his family legacy. And with that thought, his new quest crystallized. How could he awaken the loyalty of others who shared his values before Hargrove's reach snuffed out their hopes? The moment of reckoning loomed ahead, and it would not wait. He needed to act swiftly, but the real question remained. Who could he trust in a world that had turned treacherous? David's resolve hardened as he left Hargrove's office, but the weight of the conversation loomed heavily over him. He ambled through the sterile office corridors, each step echoing like a determined heartbeat, his mind racing with possibilities and strategies. The encounter had awakened something inside him, a tenacity he thought had long faded amid the corporate grind. He needed a plan, and it needed to be methodical. His first thought was to reach out to colleagues he had once considered friends. There was Morgan, the sharp-minded financial analyst who had always spoken highly of ethics in business, and Elias, the operations manager, known for his unwavering commitment to fairness. Could he engage them in this endeavor? Was there enough shared trust to form a cadre against Hargrove? David's heart thumped as he turned towards his office. The door opened slowly, and the familiar scent of old books and polished wood enveloped him. His sanctuary. Yet today, it felt both foreign and familiar, as if the walls held his doubts, reflecting his fragmented state. After closing the door, he sat down, staring at his desk cluttered with projects and reports. This was his ground zero. It needed to be transformed into a war room. He began by drafting an email to Morgan. It was crucial to frame this not as a confrontation, but as a movement towards a greater collective vision, one anchored in ethics, transparency, and mutual respect. Each word was chosen with care, a mixture of urgency and optimism. Midway through typing, he hesitated. Was he asking too much? Would Morgan's fear of repercussions outweigh his own desire for integrity? It was a question that staggered him. David took a deep breath, reminding himself of Hargrove's maneuvers that disregarded the very principles he aimed to uphold. He hit send, letting the die be cast. Empowered by that small act, David turned to Elias next. Their relationship was built on years of collaborating closely on projects, trading ideas, and respecting each other's insights. This time, he opted for a face-to-face meeting, something that felt far more personal and earnest than an impersonal email. After finishing his draft, David paced, contemplating the best place for a candid conversation. Perhaps the cafe around the block, an informal setting, away from the corporate machinery. He could trust Elias to explore ideas with an open mind. The next hour was consumed with data-driven strategies and ethical stances he would present. But self-doubt crept in. What if Elias dismissed him as naive? What if he were to betray the trust that had been painstakingly built? The nagging questions gnawed at his confidence as the time approached for their meeting. When the hour finally arrived, David slipped out of his office with a sense of urgency. The crisp air outside felt alive, invigorating him as he crossed the street to the cafe. Inside, the familiar hum of conversation rose around him, but he focused on his goal. Finding Elias at their usual spot, he greeted him with a smile that belied the turmoil within. "Hey, can we talk?" David's words burst forth, reflecting both urgency and apprehension. "Sure, everything okay?" Elias asked, brow furrowing in concern. David hesitated, the weight of truth hanging just beyond the tension. But the time had come. He needed to lay bare his intentions and the shadows lurking in the corporate corridors. He took a deep breath, knowing the success of this conversation could redefine everything. And beneath his anxious resolve, a reality throbbed in his chest, the chance to confront a larger threat and lead himself into the professional integrity he sought to reclaim. But even as the words surged, a question lingered. In a world riddled with deceit, how far would one go to safeguard his values before testing the limits of loyalty? As David gathered his thoughts, the air crackled with unspoken tension, a moment poised on the edge of revelation. Would Elias join him in the quest to stand against Hargrove, or would this attempt fracture their bond? David's heart raced as he leaned forward, urgency creeping into his tone. "Elias, I need your help. There's something wrong at the company. Hargrove's decisions, the way he's driving this project, it's eroding our values. I believe we can do better, but I can't do it alone." Elias stared, brow furrowed deeper, processing David's words. "What do you mean, eroding our values?" "David, you know how cutthroat it gets. Are you sure you want to get involved?" The doubt in Elias's voice sparked an internal conflict in David. Did he want to drag his friend into something far beyond the realm of simple office politics? He felt the metaphorical edge of a cliff beneath his feet, teetering on the brink of uncertainty. "I've never been more certain of anything," he replied, forcing clarity into his voice. "I've watched as ethics get twisted into pretzels, and I can't just sit back any longer. You know, it's not just about numbers, it's about people, our colleagues. We owe it to them to make a stand." Silence enveloped the cafe as Elias shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing around as if seeking an escape from the tension thick in the air. David's heart sank further. Was this naivete? Or was it something more profound? A recognition that he was on a path that demanded courage? "Okay, let's say I hear you," Elias finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What exactly do you have in mind?" David straightened, adrenaline propelling his thoughts. "I want us to gather evidence against Hargrove's decisions, show how they're damaging not just our work environment, but the company's reputation in the long run. We present it to the board, challenge him openly." Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You know how risky that is. What if we're wrong? What if we don't have enough to back it up? We could lose our jobs, our livelihood." "I'd rather take that risk than watch this become a toxic environment," David said, his resolve strengthening with every word. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice to draw Elias further into the conversation. "Morgan is already on board. She has insights into the financial discrepancies. If we combine our strengths, we could actually have a solid case." The flicker of interest in Elias's eyes spurred hope in David. Perhaps it wasn't just the fear that gripped them. Perhaps there was still room for honesty amid the moral decay that was creeping into their workspace. "David," Elias hesitated, a shadow of doubt lingering. "If you're wrong, then you're dismissed. What happens to our friendship? I don't want to come between us over a corporate issue." "It's not just a corporate issue. This is about integrity," David insisted, thoughts racing. "If we stay silent, we become complicit. I need you to understand that. This matters. It defines us." As he spoke, he felt the tension in his chest ease slightly. There was clarity in vulnerability. By opening up about his fears and ideals, he was truly expressing what he stood for. But the look on Elias's face remained uncertain, reflecting the stakes involved. "What if people don't support us?" Elias finally said, a flicker of resolve scarred with hesitation. David smirked, his confidence rising. "Then we show them why they should. This isn't just about us. It's about every person who feels like their voice has been swallowed by the corporate machine." Elias stared intensely at him, weighing their options, and for a brief moment David imagined they stood united against their corporate giant. He knew this was a pivotal crossroads in their relationship, one that could redefine their professional lives. "All right," Elias said finally, his voice steadying. "Let's do it. But let's be smart about it." David's heart soared. That first step had been taken. As he left the cafe invigorated, he felt the mantle of leadership settle onto his shoulders. They were no longer just cogs in a machine. They were warriors in a fight for integrity. But within that surge of determination lay an unsettling question. What would happen if Hargrove discovered their intentions before they were ready? The game was on, but David knew the stakes were higher than ever. As he prepared to delve into the fight, he realized the battle for truth was only just beginning. Would their resolve withstand the weight of the repercussions to come? David stepped into the office the next day, the adrenaline still coursing through him like electric current. There was a heightened awareness of his surroundings, the ordinary sights and sounds, the buzzing fluorescent lights, the howling of the coffee machine, felt different today. The air was thick with unresolved tension and potential danger. He could feel it in his bones. Today would be pivotal. He made his way to his desk, attempting to quell the anxious stirrings in his stomach. Every click of the keyboard and rustle of papers felt amplified, like they were mocking him with their monotonous routine. Was he truly about to challenge Hargrove? Was he ready to shatter the illusion of stability so many clung to in this place? As he settled into his chair, David forced himself to focus. He opened his laptop and pulled up the documents Morgan had sent him, outlining the financial discrepancies she'd discovered. With each page that scrolled past, he felt a sense of clarity around why he was doing this. It was not merely about changing policy, it was about rebuilding trust. He couldn't help but smile when he thought of the conversations he would have with Morgan and Elias later, strategizing their move. Together, they were poised to become more than mere observers of the turmoil. They would be architects of their own fate. But doubt nibbled at the corners of his mind. What if they were wrong? This sort of action could destroy them professionally and personally. What if Hargrove discovered their plans? They'd become mere chess pieces in a far greater game, pawns waiting to be sacrificed. The hours rolled on, and David's fear began to manifest as stress, simmering just below the surface. It was during lunch that he reconnected with Elias in the break room. Elias seemed more grounded, a comforting presence, and David felt reassured by his company. "We meet tonight to plan?" Elias asked, his casual tone belying his careful consideration of the matter. "Definitely," David replied, cautious yet eager. "Morgan uncovered a lot. If we go in with concrete evidence, we can address the board's accountability directly." Elias took a sip of coffee, hesitating. "But what if they retaliate? If Hargrove thinks you're challenging his authority, he might do everything he can to intimidate us." "I know," David interrupted, feeling the weight of the situation more than ever. "But we can't back down now. I need you with me." David felt a spark of desperation in his voice, but also an unwavering determination to combat the moral decay. Elias met his gaze. "You're right, but I think we need a well-thought-out plan. It's not just about being brave. We need evidence and strategy." The seriousness of Elias's words pushed David further into consideration. It was no longer just about standing up. It was about how to do it effectively. Hargrove was not a man to be trifled with. He was cunning and merciless, someone who would go to great lengths to protect his empire. As the day wore on, and the clock ticked toward their meeting, David felt a knot form in his stomach. He could visualize confronting Hargrove and the flood of negative emotions that could come crashing down. Fear, shame, fury. What if this moment turned into a battle he couldn't win? The thought gnawed at him, tearing at the courage he'd felt encouraged by earlier. That night, as he stood before Elias and Morgan, the rush of adrenaline returned. They laid out their findings, bold and filled with conviction. But as they spoke, David felt a familiar, unsettling question creep in. What if this wasn't just a fight for truth? What if it became personal? As they went through the evidence, David's mind swirled with images of confrontation. The stakes were high, and each decision they were making had irreversible consequences. The awareness set in that they stood not just against a person, but an entire system that thrived on manipulation. But as David looked at the determined faces of his friends, he also felt a stirring of resolve. This was bigger than himself. It involved the integrity of their shared values, a battle against the erosion of their beliefs. He wondered if this was the defining moment he'd needed all along, where personal and professional development intersected in the most profound of ways. And with that resolve, he knew the time had come to face Hargrove. Would they be prepared for the consequences of their actions, or would the weight of their choices crush them before they began? David stared at the documents scattered across the table, the fluorescent lights above flickering ominously. The words blurred as his thoughts spiraled in a chaotic whirl. Could they genuinely influence a powerful figure like Hargrove? The reality sunk in like a stone in his stomach. It was no longer merely theoretical. Tonight was the moment of action, the point of no return. "Let's go over the plan one more time," Morgan suggested, her voice steady yet edged with tension. David observed his colleagues, appreciating the seriousness they brought to the table. Each of them was embodying the resolve he wished to feel. "We confront Hargrove with the financial evidence we've compiled, and we insist on a meeting with the board," David articulated, forcing authority into his tone. "But we remain calm, assertive. We need to stay composed, no matter how he reacts." Elias nodded, leaning forward. "And if he pushes back? If he turns the tables, accusing us of insubordination?" "Then we show strength. We present the data, and when he tries to manipulate the narrative, we remain focused on the facts," David replied, his heartbeat quickening. This was the crux of a battle not just against a man, but against a culture he despised and wanted to dismantle. But the deeper fear remained. Would he actually find the strength to execute this plan? As they debated tactics, David's mind flashed back to earlier days, previous encounters when he had avoided confrontation, allowing fear to dictate his choices. The realization crashed over him. All those missed opportunities had led him to this defining moment. He had the capability to effect change. "David," Morgan said, pulling him from his reverie, "you need to understand it's crucial for you to be our voice. It's your courage that could inspire others. If you falter, we all falter." Her words resonated deeply. Was he really their voice? Would he embody that boldness? Responsibility pressed down on him like a heavy weight, triggering a wave of anxiety. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I can do this. We can do this." Emerging determination surged through him, and he felt a flicker of hope. They weren't alone. His team was there to support him. Each of them contributed unique skills and perspectives, and together they formed a cohesive unit, capable of challenging Hargrove's tyranny. As the meeting time approached, the air thickened. David's palms grew clammy. He imagined Hargrove's reaction, how the man's charisma could morph into wrath at the first sign of challenge. It wouldn't be merely unprofessional, it could become dangerously personal. He breathed in deeply, allowing his focus to crystallize. David understood that this was more than just a confrontation. It was a declaration of their beliefs. It signified a promise to uphold integrity, a testament against the decay of trust and accountability. They gathered their materials, aligning the charts and graphs that spoke the truth they needed to unveil. David felt a flicker of excitement, something he believed had long been snuffed out, growing amidst the apprehension. "Remember," he emphasized once more before they left the room, "we're not doing this just for ourselves, but for everyone in this organization who feels powerless." The three of them exchanged determined glances, igniting the flame of resilience within David's chest. The moment for action had arrived, but with it came the uncertain enormity of what could follow. As they stepped toward Hargrove's office, Every step echoed like a drumbeat of impending change. The weight of their choices pressed down on him, and David questioned whether he could rise to meet the challenge. Would he find the strength to accept that confrontation was necessary for transformation, or would he crumble under the pressure? Just as he reached for the door handle, a familiar sense of dread pulled at him again. His heart raced. The moment of truth loomed large, and he understood with clarity. Tonight might alter not only their careers, but the very fabric of their moral convictions. Would he manage to stand firm against a force seeking to dismantle their cause, or would he discover a side of himself he never wanted to face? As David's hand hovered over the door handle, a microcosm of indecision captured his mind. It could have been a fleeting moment, a recalibrated heartbeat before he stepped into the fray, or it could unearth the foundation-shaking regret of countless hesitations. This was it, an opportunity for confrontation that had been built through silent plotting rather than the comfortable avoidance he once resorted to. With a decisive exhale, he turned the handle and stepped into Hargrove's office. The dim lighting went against the authority the man typically exuded. Papers laid in casual disarray on the desk, and the walls were decorated with accolades that painted a lopsided success story. At first glance, it felt more like an arena than a place of business. Hargrove swung around in his leather chair, the surprise in his eyes quickly morphing into a careful curiosity. David, Morgan, Elias. He leaned back, that familiar sardonic smile creeping across his face. What brings you here in such formation? David swallowed hard, the room closing in around him, but he steadied his breath, not wanting to show weakness. We need to talk about the financial discrepancies and your dealings within the organization. His own voice shook slightly, but firmed with each word. Every scrutinizing gaze from Hargrove demanded attention, and he could feel the weight of his colleagues beside him. Ah, the proverbial truth-seekers. Hargrove's voice dripped with mockery. And here I thought you were well-adjusted employees. He chuckled softly. It felt dismissive, but that emoji-like shift from power play to amusement ignited something in David. Elias stepped forward, the tension between them shifting. It's not a joke, Hargrove. We have documents that confirm fraud. You've played games with people's lives and ruined careers. The tension escalated, and for the first time, David saw Elias as an ally rather than a crony. Each voiced indictment solidified their purpose. Hargrove's brow furrowed, a reaction that sent a shiver of uncertainty through David. And you think you can work this out? Why should I be intimidated by your little band of whistleblowers? Because we are not backed into corners anymore, David blurted out, surprising himself with the spontaneous intensity. It felt exhilarating, like breathing air after being submerged underwater. We are capable of change, and you can no longer hide from the consequences of your actions. With each exchanged word, the atmosphere grew electric, sparking with an unwelcome intensity. Hargrove's demeanor shifted, his confidence wavered, the smirk faltering inch by inch as the data David's team amassed began to weigh heavy in the room. I could destroy your careers with a single phone call. Hargrove leaned in as if testing David's resolve. You think your moral crusade will save you. You're well aware that the world works on power, not ethics. No, David countered, his heart racing with determination. Power built on fear is a house of cards. It will crumble. The weight of his words felt significant, an actual stake in a game he often felt underqualified to play. In that moment, David felt the grip of fear recede, replaced by a surging belief in not just himself but in what they all represented. Each step he took had been a calculation of cooperation, leading to this confrontation. You're naive, Hargrove scoffed, and David knew the conversation could swing either way. The truth had entered a battlefield. Maybe, David admitted, feeling bold, but we're not the naive ones. You underestimated our strength when you thought you could manipulate us. Tonight we make sure you understand that your power derived from manipulation is waning. Hargrove's expression shifted, surprised yet cautious. For the first time he appeared taken aback, glancing briefly at Morgan and Elias, as if assessing their loyalty in a split second. The tension hung palpably in the air, a moment hovering on the precipice of disaster or victory. Then, in a swift motion, Hargrove pressed a button on his desk. David's heart raced. Had they stepped too far? Summoned security, perhaps? Courage or folly? Hargrove stated, voice cold as he eyed them. David's resolve trembled on the edge of uncertainty, but it had also blossomed into a challenge. Both, David replied defiantly, but we're ready for whatever comes next. The moment hung in the air, verification of how fragile power could be and how fleeting trust was, as the door creaked open behind them. Could they hold their ground against a titan desperate for control? Or could they uncover something greater than mere accountability, an unmasking of the system they were up against? The air crackled with tension inside Hargrove's office, as David stood resolutely alongside Morgan and Elias. The cacophony of uncertainty from their earlier discussions had transformed into a collective determination. The stakes had never felt higher. It wasn't merely about financial discrepancies or corporate greed. It was a stand against a compromise of integrity that had been allowed to fester for too long. David, Hargrove sneered, dismissing their presence with an arrogance that was infuriating yet invigorating. You think your little charade can rattle me? You've become a pawn in a game you clearly don't understand. David's confidence solidified with each word. It is not just a game for us. It's our lives and our values. You've manipulated everyone around here for too long, Hargrove. The only thing crumbling is your reputation. Hargrove leaned forward, skepticism painted across his face. And you believe the board will back you? You're outnumbered, David. You're playing a dangerous hand. Maybe, David replied, his voice steady under pressure. But we're fighting for a cause that resonates beyond your logic of power and intimidation. As David spoke, he felt the strength of the bonds he had forged with Morgan and Elias. Their unwavering support manifested as a shield against the palpable threat that Hargrove posed. It was a revelation. Confrontation unveiled hidden capabilities and ignited the courage that had long been dormant within him. With a flick of his wrist, Hargrove gestured to one of his aides who had observed silently until now. If you think you can sway the board, you're delusional. Yet the aide's expression hung between admiration and apprehension, a reflection of a larger uncertainty among the ranks. Don't underestimate us, Morgan interjected, her voice sharp. We have documentation, testimonials, evidence that illustrates years of unethical practices. We stand united and we won't back down. Hargrove's composure faltered briefly, a crack in the facade exposing his unease. You naive fools, you think loyalty is worth anything in this world? Loyalty to our values is worth everything, David replied, anchoring his gaze with steadfast resolve. We're done being pawns in your game. This is about reclaiming our integrity, and we won't be silenced any longer. The room swelled with the gravity of David's assertions. He felt the weight of his mother's lessons resurface, the principles of honesty, respect, and courage, magnified within the fragile walls of corporate life. Each inhale filled him with conviction. The gathered evidence began to click into a cohesive narrative that transcended their personal ambitions. In that decisive moment, with Hargrove's defenses visibly crumbling, David leaned forward. I want to make it clear. We will bring this to light. We've organized testimonials and evidence that'll vindicate our stance and expose your treachery. If we walk out of this office with nothing, our voices will rise together in the public arena. With every beat of his heart, clarity replaced doubt. This confrontation wasn't simply an act of defiance, it was a proclamation of rebirth. David had embraced the truth. Standing for what was right meant standing with others who had equally felt stifled and oppressed. He had aligned himself not just to a career, but to a purpose. The distinct possibility of accountability ignited a realization within him. A wave of immediate satisfaction washed over him. He experienced a profound connection with his colleagues, a supportive allyship that had turned isolated fears into a collective fight for their future. There was power in participation, a shared will for ethical perseverance that thrived under adversity. As Hargrove rose to his feet, attempting to reclaim the narrative, David completed the loop he'd once feared to step into. Your tactics stop here. For us, this is about rebuilding trust, about having the courage to confront the shadows you've cast in this organization. We represent change, and it's time for growth, not stagnation. Suddenly the door swung open, revealing the board members who had gathered after David had pressed the panic button. Confusion and intrigue danced across their faces as they took in the scene before them. David turned to face them, the electric thrill of hope buoying him. "We're sorry for the interruption, but we need to discuss pressing matters concerning our financial practices and the direction our leadership has taken. No more silence, no more betrayal." The board members exchanged concerned glances, caught in a whirlwind that David had now orchestrated. He saw their willingness to listen, to engage with the truth they had buried. The moment of reckoning swelled in the air. David had finally embraced his role, not just as an employee but as an advocate for integrity and change. This newfound strength, born from collective struggle and support, had empowered him to reclaim not only his legacy, but one that would ripple throughout the organization. As the murmurs of disbelief captured the room's attention, David realized that he had transcended mere survival. He had shattered the chains of compliance. The journey had been arduous, but he was no longer a passive observer. This was his narrative, his legacy, and at long last he had discovered the resources to secure it. And as he looked into the eyes of his allies, resolute and steadfast, the weight of doubt dissipated entirely. He had achieved a remarkable transformation. He became a leader, not from title or status, but from the bravery of standing against betrayal. This cathartic moment heralded a powerful shift, one grounded in transparency, resilience, and an unwavering pursuit of truth. Acknowledgement lay beyond the horizon, and he felt the beginnings of a solid, united front forming against the overwhelming tide of oppression. It is in the embracing of truth that he had fulfilled not only his potential, but also restored his moral compass as well, the one guiding light that had been instilled in him by Margaret. As he took a deep, relieved breath, he understood his journey was one not solely of confrontation, but of reclamation, a profound commitment bound by respect, trust, and a future built on integrity. This was the moment of triumph he had long envisioned, a victory over the shadows of deceit and a clear pathway towards a newly defined legacy. Now, dear audience, this is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others find this journey of transformation. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusive moment. It matters more than you realize. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to share this message and inspire change now. Don't wait even one more second. Stand with the power of truth.